Wow. Silence.
Can't decide if is Jack does he have a filter on that's making him look like he's loading, or is he
Maybe his computer exploded from all the filters.
He need a parachute.
Oh wow.
I don't see the gaze thing. That's so
it's just in the video tab.
It's not a well. Oof,
like if you click it on and off, it's so weird.
The other stuff is really good, actually. The face stuff works super well.
Yeah. Imagine how it would be so different in different like areas and zones. Like the beauty standard would change, I guess.
Yeah.
New makeup.
Wow. I can move the size of my face, which is quite amazing. All right.
I want to stay like this now. Such a disappointment when you remove the filters.
Yeah. It makes me kind of wonder, is like, does everybody look the way they're supposed to look? It's nice.
All right.
So how does this work today? I think I'm first, right?
Yes. And then we will have Jack and Leslie Space Popular. Or do you guys prefer to speak separately or together as a group?
No, we speak together, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Have you got a slideshow, Sean, or is it only us to have a slideshow?
No, I have as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's going to take. I never really thought about the length. So I was told it could be like between 15 and 30 minutes, but I don't think it's anywhere longer than 30 minutes. I want to talk for that long. Bore you guys. And after the after the presentations, I guess we just have discussions, right?
Yes.
Yes, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
I was just going to ask if the questions are like, are they going to just be like, are they at the end for each individual person, or is this like part of the kind of curation of the conversation?
So after
Eva, we will start the live streaming in 10 seconds. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah, just after the presentation, we'll have time for discussion.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you all for coming today to the roundtable of the New Digital Design Forum, and welcome everyone who's watching us on the streaming platforms Bilibili and YouTube. My name is Eva. I will be your host and moderator of today. So before introducing to this event, I'd like to thank everyone who participated to make it happen. And thanks to our friends and followers who kept following the event from a rough idea to today in this relatively short period of time. We have reached 13,000 of viewers at the same time last night at our roundtable seminar on digital art and fashion. Without your strong support, active and kind collaboration from our guests, and a lot of help from our volunteers, this wouldn't be such a success. So thanks again to everyone. Hope you will have a great time tonight. So first, let me welcome our curators, Hupeng, LeiFeng, and Yuting to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone. Good morning, good night, good evening, and welcome everyone to our roundtable discussion. I'm Hupeng, one of the curators. I study architecture in the University of Hong Kong, and right now I'm the co-founder of the Mark II Meta project, which is an architect plus metaverse group. I'm also a cross-reality designer, VR artist, and game architecture designer. Also, I'm currently working as a game architect for MiHoYo, one of the top-level game company in China. Next, let's welcome the other two amazing creators, LeiFeng and Yuting.
Thank you, Peng.
Hi, everyone. So happy to see you tonight. Oh, you are not tonight. You're in the afternoon, right? Yeah. My name is Yuting. Yeah, I'm one of the curators of New Digital Design Forum, and I'm also an architect, 3D artist, and installation designer. I was graduated from Columbia University and SunArc from LA. And as a future-facing designer, my experiments with emerging digital technologies and combines multiple medias. I'm trying to blur the boundary between the digital and physical world by practicing architectural space, volumetric video, artificial AI, and immersive experiences. And right now I'm working with some fashion brands and with like Burberry, Bose, and some other companies to do some like mixed reality projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yuting. Welcome. And LeiFeng, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is LeiFeng. I'm a designer, director, and a Phygital artist. I'm currently studying at Harvard University Graduate School of Design. Wait a second, the video is stuck. Okay. Yeah, I'm currently studying at Harvard University Graduate School of Design, focusing on the media and the technology. I was originally trained as an architect. I graduated from Uni of Liverpool and SunArc previously, and I used to work at Manchester before. I mainly work on various mediums such as architecture, multimedia installation, motion graphics, mixed reality, and 3D scan. And my practice centers around the influence of digital and physical on shifting the boundaries of the design of spaces, objects, and the perception experience. In collaboration with Yuting, another curator, we have also running a creative studio called Play.work, and we have fortunately collaborated with brands such as Burberry, Postdigital, Wallpaper Magazine, London Fashion Week, and some other musicians to bring architecture thinking into their music videos. Thank you, and I hope to have a great conversation with you guys.
Thank you, LeiFeng. Next, I would like to thank the Global Knowledge LeiFeng, a nonprofit educational organization based in China, who has always supported us to organize and hold events. I'm very pleased to introduce this international organization to you. Global Knowledge LeiFeng is a nonprofit educational organization initiated by the Professor Zhou Rong from Tsinghua University, which aims to spread professional knowledge and information in arts and humanities, especially in the realm of architecture. We believe in daily efforts, selfless dedication, and contribution. The latest ideas could be brought worldwide to students and scholars in China while breaking the language and regional barriers. Now let's invite our executive editor, Cai Shiyu, who represents the organization and herself, to give us a quick speech.
Well, thank you very much, Eva. Hello, everyone. Cai Shiyu, Executive Editor of Global Knowledge LeiFeng, and we are a young global organization with over 1,000 academic volunteers all over the world. We have been working on academic content translation and production for 4 years, and it's our great honor to have such a chance to organize this forum. Today's guests' amazing works and inspiring thoughts truly have significant influence. Thank you all for coming. On behalf On behalf of LeiFeng, please let me give my great thanks to our host, Eva, and the team behind her. This forum is not possible without the excellent curating jobs of LeiFeng, Hu Peng, Zhu Yuting, Eva, and many volunteers. Thanks to Amber, Chen Beijia, Elian, He Danning, Hua Jie, Jasmine, Li Qifan, Ling Yibo, Liu Jing, Liu Zhanyuan, Luo Jingling, Si Ling, Shi Jian, Sophia, Tang Ziye, Tang Haoheng, Wang Yuehua, Xiang Tiansheng, Ye Yiran, Yilei, Yolander, Yu Yang, Zheng Haozhou, Zhang Peishan, Zhu Shilong, Zhou Kangfu. And thank you again and looking forward to the coming forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Shi. Thank you so much. We have a strong community behind us. Among them are thousands of architecture students studying all around the world, scholars, educators, and community members from different backgrounds. And it's very exciting to see this happening in China, especially in this particular year. So let's look forward to what's going to happen in the coming years. And if you're interested in these knowledge sharing platforms, please feel free to connect with us. So now let's jump into the topic of today. Let me quickly introduce the forum, New Digital Design. New Digital Design focuses on Phygital and Postdigital. It is a series of events that discusses the new meaning, future impact, and novel application of digital in design. The topics are transdisciplinary, including architecture, art, fashion, motion graphics, and business, etc. New digital design can be any design strategy or method that is not constrained in the past digital age. The participants include architecture and design professors, designers, and digital artists in practice, and pioneers in the industry. We will have 4 roundtable seminars about art, architecture, and the metaverse, with theory, exhibition, workshop, and article translation publication. If you're interested in this event, please follow our official account and stay tuned. And for those who's watching us over streaming platforms, please also share the link to your friends. And let's begin with today's panel. Today's panel is the first panel of the Postdigital and Phygital in Architecture. We have divided this event into 2 panels for different time zones. So our guests today are mostly based in Europe, and the next will be hosted at the end of August with the same format and with our guests based in North American time zones. Throughout this period, we will be posting publications and deliver article translations from authors around the world. Please stay tuned. So, in the face of the post-pandemic era, new questions have been posted with regards to our relationship with time and space. In the contemporary context, today's forum will discuss from a theoretical standpoint what new digital relates to and signifies beyond the immediate physical realities. Today we have 4 extremely talented and renowned guests, architects, the word builder speaking with us. So I'm really honored to introduce everyone to you. We have invited Jack Self, the author of The Big Flat Now, that has inspired us to hold this event. We have Sean McCollum, aka I Heart Blob. He's an architectural designer and digital artist. And we have co-founders of Space Popular, educator and designer, Lara Lesmith and Frederick Halberg. For today's panel, we will have 2 sessions with a break. In the first session, each guest will give us a presentation to share their work. And after we take a short break, in the second session, we will have a free discussion that will last around an hour to 2 hours, depends on what the format goes. So without further ado, let's welcome our first speaker, Sean, to begin his presentation. As I have introduced Sean, his work investigates the impact of new technologies upon socio-political cultures through ephemeral architectural objects and installations. His projects, which explores accessibility and integration of digital technologies, within existing physical structures have received a variety of awards and have been published internationally. As a researcher, Sean has served as a traveling fellow in China, investigating the interplay of mystical historical ruins juxtaposed with new consumer-led architectural objects and under-occupied megacities. With his interest in hybridized realities, Sean has taught workshops on augmented reality and virtual reality through experimental workflow. So let's welcome Sean to begin his speak with us. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for the kind words as well. I'm just going to share my screen for you guys.
Yeah.
All right, hopefully everybody can see this. Yep. Cool. So today I'm going to mostly go through the work of our studio, iHeartBlob, give you kind of an introduction into the work that we've been working on over the past 5 years, from publications to installations to architecture pavilions and pretty much everything else in between. So yeah, let's get started. So there's 3 of us in iHeartBlob. I'm the green one in the middle, and Sasha's to my left and Ben to my right. And we kind of started the studio with I guess a fascination of kind of combining architecture and technology, and this kind of broader context of phygital technologies or phygital architectures, and looking at the combination of physical and digital components. And we've kind of worked on pretty much everything mixed reality and XR since 2016, from both a theoretical standpoint and then also obviously our practice as well. So we started the studio, I guess, in a kind of a standard way now, but at the time it felt very bizarre. So we started every day producing designs and renderings and kind of posting each day a single architectural object to social media. In this case, it was an Instagram, but I guess it doesn't matter which platform you're doing this on. It kind of worked upon this idea of the everyday, which was beginning to get quite popular at the time with people like Beeple. And alongside these short or these small architectural projects, there was a piece of theoretical and conceptual text, and the idea was to ignite and provoke kind of conversation. This was something we felt was missing from our own educations, but also missing from the architectural discourse in general. And if you're familiar with our work, you'll be aware that these first kind of 1 object became 10, then it became 100, and then we've now got over 1,000 of these like different projects and work that have been kind of produced every single day for the last 4 or 5 years. So with each kind of new object we developed, the idea for us, especially in the form making and the design aspects of things, was to kind of challenge new architectural qualities in quite playful ways. And at some point, we'd kind of had so many of these objects that they started kind of stretching beyond the physical world and their own world and then we started developing into augmented reality and thinking about how these architectural objects might transpire out of the Instagram, out of the space that we were kind of navigating within. And then quite quickly, you've produced all this work and realized to yourself that you've generated your own data set. And we did what any sensible set of architects would do. And we asked a machine essentially to try and replicate our work and start to produce more. So you can see on the left is the training set, and on the right is the actual production of what the machine was generating. Like, this is a couple of years ago that we actually produced these. So it's quite low res, quite pixelated, but you can start to see some of these like emerging reflections and forms, and even some like differentiation between the foreground and the background. So again, quite early steps, but definitely something that we've been thinking about revisiting on a more thorough scale. And then because we started doing all these projects every single day, and we tried to add new complexity into every project, and we did it within what we were calling series. So every 100 projects, we defined a new set of rules and new ideas for kind of furthering this complexity and richness that we were developing through the projects. And at one point, they became so complex that we were designing our own biomes and their surroundings, their landscapes, the cities that they might inhabit, to a point where they were inhabiting each other's space. And we generated this whole city and island, essentially, where these architectural pieces, architectural designs were kind of in correlation with each other. They had a language differentiation at times, and also a communication between each other. Again, thinking about these are every single day projects. But then the architectural object, like I said before, began to kind of stretch beyond the screen, and it started populating our own world. So we did that through augmented reality. And kind of bearing in mind this was early 2017, where there was kind of limited capabilities for most phones, and especially on the side of AR. I don't even think Instagram had released the open beta for Spark AR, which meant that face filters and things like that were also still in the very beginning stages. But what's really nice about this is that we were able to distribute and share so much of our work across the world, and we kind of took them with us. So when we lived in LA, there was objects that were distributed. There's some in London, Glasgow, Hong Kong, Iceland, Estonia, Vienna, and a lot of other places as well. So yeah, here's a kind of close-up of some of these ones. The first one on the left here, this lives in LA. The second is in Istanbul, and the third is in Wien Mitte in Vienna, which is a shopping mall attached to a train station. So as they began to kind of take over, I guess, our physical world, they then became kind of one with us and started traveling with us as well personally. And we started to think about how we could use our bodies to kind of transform the AR, or how the AR could transform our bodies, but not in the traditional sense of what we were speaking about at the beginning of this call of how when we're on Zoom or anything like this, we can actually maybe alter our faces through filters. But it was more like exploring how these kind of strange speculative design experiments could allow us to begin to understand architecture, space, and this negotiation between physical and digital worlds, and how we interact with digital interfaces. And this is something that's directly applied to the way that we've been approaching architecture, both on the built side and the way that we're designing digitally as well. And as you'd have guessed, the primary tool of the studio became augmented reality, and it was acting as a liminal scanner between both physical and digital space. So the studio had started to pick up a little bit of pace by this point, and we were starting taking on projects and exhibitions, some publications. And with every commission or every kind of opportunity that we were given, the idea was to combine or contrast or think about both physical and digital entities together, whether that's of just an extension of the physical, or if they're in juxtaposition, maybe they complement each other. And this was part of the thinking behind this digital Baroque pavilion, which was in Vancouver. So within this project, we kind of tried to push the boundaries of what people understand and know as architecture. So on the physical side of things, sure, we're very patternized and textured and quite, I guess in some cases, flamboyant, I guess, with the colors and so on. So it attracts some attention, but it's just quite a simple kind of Monopoly-esque house. I guess in some ways an architectural primitive. But by adding these new layers of extension with augmented reality, we were able to kind of think of architecture more closely aligned to this idea of software. So you can see that the architecture, it grows, expands from two-dimensional faces to three-dimensional. It starts shifting scales. There's ways in which people can actually interact with it, even through simple things like being able to tap the screen and initiating animations or revealing something. And for us, it was one of these interesting things to see how people directly interact with these pieces of architecture through their phones. And you'd be surprised at how seamless this this actually is, especially for this project that we're primarily using social AR. So most people in Vancouver anyway have Instagram, and just being able to scan a QR code instantly pop up the effects and give you that opportunity to kind of expand the physical world has been really quite exciting for us. And you can kind of see here on the left is what we actually designed before producing the 3D, I guess, representation of the original digital 3D, where we're designing this kind of, what we were planning or what we were thinking about at the time was this Baroque pavilion or Baroque facade that questioned notions of scale. So it's a house, but we're designing it with the granularity of a Baroque facade with lots of ornamentation, like this kind of archways and things are much grander than they should be for the size of a home. And we're also kind of designing this as a recessed facade, and there's like, I guess, about 5 meters depth, and then this was flattened and then actually wrapped around this kind of small architectural primitive, and then again transformed back into its kind of strange distorted three-dimensionality through the augmentation. So like I said, we've been lucky enough to kind of apply a lot of these concepts to a number of kind of exhibitions and shows, like this pavilion also in Canada. We've had a lot of really nice opportunities in Canada. This is Noodle Feed, which was produced in 2020, I think in February, so quite early last year. Thankfully, it was the time where we were able to socialize and get out together and enjoy it while it lasted. So the idea was to produce like a endlessly configurable physical noodles alongside this idea of a spatialized Facebook-style news feed, which we were calling the Noodle Feed. And the idea here was to allow people to create this digital sense of place where people were able to leave small memories, some photos, drawings, text, and these were all actively stored on the Noodle Feed. So passerbys could come and actually visit it and visit the memories as well and see where people had left kind of small notes or photos with their kids or photos with their dogs and so on, which was a really nice way, I guess, of interacting with the public, both on, sure, the architecture is quite fun and playful, the kids loved it, but also there's trying to create this sense of community out of it as well. So like even now, long after the pavilions or the installation's gone, there's still this digital sense of place left behind, where hopefully you can see this video and people are able to kind of visit the beach in Toronto and see some of these memories that people have left behind and kind of, understand what took place in February and March last year, which is really nice, I think, especially since the installation is now gone. So we've taken the findings, I guess, or this understanding into how people interact with architecture and potentially could interact with architecture in the future from the Vancouver project and the Toronto project, and applied it to this new mixed reality pavilion, which kind of demands a little bit less tactility, obviously because of the current situation. So this pavilion's aptly named Arc de Blob, and it aims to make the architecture accessible across the world. So not only for the people that can actually visit it in Toronto, but also for me, for you. So if you scan the QR code, you can actually place the project in your bedroom, in your living room, which is kind of a nice way to allow people to feel comfortable with the architecture as well, and also allow even for us to actually visit the space, because unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we've not been able to visit the finished construction either. But one of the cool things I think about this project for us was that we were combining social AR, so Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, these kind of things, with construction. So we've seen construction processes with AR before. I'm sure we've seen it with Hologram and the HoloLens and stuff. but we wanted to make it as accessible as possible, as simple as possible, and kind of push the boundaries of like, okay, it's supposed to be a face filler, right? So, but can we use face filters essentially for construction? So you can see on the far right-hand side, we actually worked with the contractor to allow them to use these social AR and these kind of, I guess, new documentation that we were envisioning to put the project together, especially on a ornamentation side of things. And it starts to kind of democratize quite a lot of these processes of construction, and the actual traditional methods of documentation also potentially go out the window. So I guess here's just a small comparison of the project from its physical to its digital, or digital to physical output. So unfortunately, we weren't able to produce the base for the archway, but this is mostly just because of the location. The idea was that it would hold the arch. I would keep it down, keep it from flying away or falling over whilst it was on the beach. But we rescheduled the things, and it became an installation in Toronto's distillery district. So, of course, we weren't going to produce another piece of work without adding augmented reality to the actual pavilion as well, which has been super nice. Like, just people being able to share their experience with the project in general. We've had hundreds upon hundreds of images shared on social media, people taking photos of their dogs and so on. People love taking photos of their dogs with us. It's really amazing. But obviously, people are able to kind of explore these portals and some of the moving parts of the architecture. And the idea is quite simple, I guess. It's just about changing the way that the public interact with architecture. And again, this is something we found is incredibly seamless. It's never been something that feels forced. And it doesn't feel like it's much of a task, especially if it's something so simple that you scan a QR code and then within a few seconds you're able to interact with the architecture in a new way. So taking this interaction with architecture in the city a little bit further, we've kind of began exploring the relationship between, in this case, modernist architecture and urban planning traditions, with a kind of future-facing approach to augmented reality and people's movements within the city. I guess this is a more clear example of this kind of crossover between physical and digital interactions, where perhaps the architecture becomes, again, more like software, more reactive, and kind of reflects on the people moving through it. So it questions the role of architecture as no longer a stagnant kind of concrete entity, but again, like software, where architecture can adapt and react to the user's needs and their movements throughout the city. So the architecture kind of reconfigures itself to help direct the person move through the space. It starts to configure spaces that are more understandable for whether it's a group gathering and so on, and taking influence quite a lot from the way that we think of the way people move together with something like Pokemon Go, where you can, of course, imagine that people move through the city kind of in like data points or datum points. And sometimes there's these like congregations that people come together and all these kind of things that don't have to be as rigidly set, I think, within the city, but can perhaps be more flexible by allowing the architecture to kind of allow itself to reconfigure through a mixed reality experience. So I'll play a short video for you. I'll only go through a smaller part of this video, but yeah, like along the way, the user Matt here he will encounter new landmarks, new nodes, and kind of these newly formed districts. And the idea was to take the Barbican estate as a given and start to kind of set a three-dimensional geometry to manipulate and kind of reconfigure, and thus reflect, I guess, upon personal urbanisms. So an architecture or an urbanism which is personal to you, it's specific, and it reflects the things that you do, but also the needs that you have throughout the space. And you can see a couple of instances of this within the film that focuses on the movement of Matt. who's here kind of exploring the Barbican for the first time, and all these different kinds of cues that the architecture tries to explain to him as he moves through it. And all of this research, I guess, that we've been working on for the past few years has culminated in the release of our first book. So we released this I Heart Blob Architectural Objects, a New Visual Language, or Augmented Architectural Objects, a New Visual Language, just in the summer last year, which actually has a lot of really nice long-form contributions from some of our friends, like Lara and Frederick wrote a really nice piece for it as well. And there's some really nice short-form pieces of text that are spread out throughout the publication. The book itself kind of tries to break down this kind of barrier to entry within both academic writing and academic thought. I think for us, anyway, we understand that from a student's point of view specifically, and even from a practice and architect's point of view, that you can often feel that you need to have read multiple philosophies or multiple books, which are all associated with each other before you kind of understand anything, especially if you just pick up a piece of architectural theory for the first time. And the idea of these like kind of short, bite-sized pieces of text is to, again, like we did at the very beginning of the studio formation, was to pose questions, provoke conversation, provoke disagreements. So each short piece of text was initially about the size of a tweet. So it was initially like 140 words, or 140 characters, sorry. But it's kind of been expanded a little bit. So they're a maximum, I think, about 200 words. And the idea is to kind of, question specific things within architectural theory and philosophy and pose in sometimes quite questionable answers, but sometimes they're quite interesting answers as well that can get some thoughts flowing. And each text is individualized, so the fact that you wouldn't have to read the full book to kind of understand what's going on is quite a nice thing for us anyway. And again, why would we make a book that's incredibly slow and this kind of stagnant process without adding additional potential to the book? So it was incredibly important for us to be able to add this augmented reality component and an app that goes alongside it, with the idea to kind of, again, we're thinking about architecture more like software. It's updatable, it's editable, it's interactive, and we don't kind of think of a book to be any different. We don't want that to be the stagnant process or the stagnant piece of our work. So we wanted to allow it to have this flexibility to kind of fulfill this criteria of being updatable, editable, and interactive. So until this point, I've kind of heavily focused on this notion of physical and digital, or the Phygital. But I want to speak a little bit about purely virtual space or purely online space. And this is primarily because of the pandemic and the fact that throughout the last year or so, year and a half, there's been a desire, I guess, to design space and to validate the design of space beyond the physical, so within virtual space as well. And I think what's really important for that is this notion of validating virtual space, because it becomes a viable solution for architects practicing in the future. So we were commissioned by the Vienna Design Week. The idea was to design a theater, purely virtual, a web space that people can visit together. They can visit in VR, they can visit just on their desktops or on their mobile phones. And sure, there was like I said, there were specific platform constraints, but the idea for us anyway was to kind of develop a new Teatro Olimpico, but obviously purely virtually. So, and if you're familiar with the Palladio and Scamozzi project, then you're well aware of this kind of role of perspective within the architecture. There's really only, I guess, one point that's incredibly important within that project. But when you're working purely digital or digitally, there's no gravity to deal with, no materiality constraint, there's no real budget to be considered either. On a on a material basis. But what we do have is a range of kind of new techniques. So we have like flat materials that are possible to be completely two-dimensionalized from specific perspectives. And we have the ability to kind of seamlessly project two-dimensional artifacts from very specific camera angles, specific views. And the idea for us was to take these really complex primitives, essentially, because they're built up of spheres and cylinders and all these things like that, and project them across the space that the architecture starts to reveal and unveil itself as you move through the space as well. So it kind of ended up being this like winding ramp, which kind of choreographs itself as the visitor moves, where there's specific points where the architecture comes into alignment, and then it reveals itself as actually a three-dimensional object. It's not completely flat. And the idea, I guess, for that is to kind of, I guess, hybridize this kind of complex array of primitives that each gateway is built upon, and this flattening that we've obviously been able to render these three-dimensional objects as two-dimensional objects, project them onto the three-dimensional, and actually change the way that the geometry is put together. So in a lot of cases, the actual architecture itself is so disconnected that it's actually you're unable to kind of piece the puzzle together, and it creates this deconstruction, I guess. So leading on to the last couple of slides that I've got here, our kind of investment or time that we've spent developing, I guess, or contributing to the metaverse, it's been broad and long. And the idea for us of like exploring physical and digital space and virtual space has always been something we've been fascinated with. But we've also been fascinated with these kind of notions of decentralization. And obviously, if you're familiar with like blockchain technology, then there's the decentralization of technology to an extent. And this notion that we could combine the decentralization for a potential immersive internet with new forms of digital property, new forms of currency, and I guess quite importantly for an architect is this notion of collective ownership. So with that and kind of the virtual spaces that we've designed, we were asked to design another by A+D, and the idea was to speculate on the future of space. So I guess due to the times that we're living in, it was purely virtual. But the idea was to mint this virtual city on the blockchain, which allows people to, of course, validate it through traditional means of finance, but also allow someone or a collective to actually own a virtual city online. Of course, there's examples with Decentraland and so on as well that allow you to, for instance, take it there. And obviously, like NFTs, they've been increasingly important for the digital art movement. And I think they're equally important for kind of validating virtual space or virtual architecture. And it provides this potential for architects to work without specific clients and to design architecture for communities, with communities, in which the communities can actually own and contribute to through kind of these decentralized processes. So, like I said, the project itself is kind of a small explorative city, which has this kind of potential of ownership. And what we found through doing this is that there's a series of kind of new potentials worth exploring within the blockchain space. And I think that's something that it's such a growing space for the industry in general. But I think it's interesting to think of it from an architect's point of view, because there's an opportunity here to validate some of these virtual or hybrid spaces that we've been designing and thinking about in a way to, I guess, speculate on a new future for the quote-unquote architect. So we took a few, so we minted the whole city essentially on Ethereum, but we took small snippets from the space and kind of visualized them towards a level of realism in comparison to the to the others, but allowed this to be kind of, again, minted upon a proof of stake protocol. The idea was to kind of further cement this idea of building communities around architecture, but also architecture around communities. And there's a kind of reciprocal process between this connection, which is, I think, increasingly exciting because there isn't this kind of hierarchy of who determines what, or who determines what is the potential of architecture, what is the potential of a project within a city, and so on. And it actually provides a lot of agency to communities that are able to, I guess, pull together to do these projects. So the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is just another small snippet of non-fungible tokens. So I spoke a little bit about the purely virtual space, or virtual ownership as well, and we've kind of become accustomed to this notion that images or videos are what non-fungible tokens are, primarily through people like Beeple that sell a collection of images, obviously for an insane amount of money. But I guess one thing that we wanted to do is kind of validate that these virtual entities, these kind of hybrid digital spaces that we're able to distribute, can go directly to the hands of people that want to actually own them. And in some ways, it does validate the digital process in general, and being able to produce this work, but also being able somebody to kind of own it or even explore it in their own locations, and it makes it far more flexible. I think one thing that's interesting to kind of leave on is because these kind of air rights for augmented reality spaces are not fully defined, it's kind of a gray area. We can kind of already envision new forms of ownership of virtual architecture in cities. I would presume through a non-fungible process, like we've done here, but in future cities, I think very, very soon. And I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean.
I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Yeah,
I found it.
Thank you, Sean. I'm glad you kind of, your presentation is really broad and is covering also the field of blockchain, NFTs, and virtual assets. And we're actually organizing another conversation tomorrow with digital artists and NFT designers. So it would also be nice if you guys can join tomorrow. And let's move next to Jack Self. Jack Self is the director of the Real Foundation. He is the editor-in-chief in the Real Review. He is the unit master of Diploma 6 in the Architectural Association. Jack's architectural work is focused on domestic space and the pursuit of social equality through housing. He has also curated the British Pavilion and the Venice Architectural Biennale in 2016. Jack's ideas have influenced people from many different industries. His work inspired fashion world, which venues to the idea of space-time homogenization. So let's welcome Jack to give us his speech. Hello, Jack.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. As is classic for
sorry, Jack.
Virtual presentations, my internet connection is not good. So I hope you'll be able to hear me.
We couldn't hear.
Okay. That's good?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's better
I'm
now.
just going to keep talking. We'll see how we go. I don't have a presentation to make. I want to...
Sorry, Jack, I think we lost you.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we can hear you now. It's not quite stable.
What about this? Oh, is this better? Hello?
Hello. Yeah, we can hear you now. Okay.
Would it be better if Jack turned off the video? Just keep the audio.
I don't think it's responsive.
Yeah, can you hear me okay without the video?
Yes, it's better now.
Okay, let's try that. And if it cuts out, then we can I can try and find a better network. Of course, it's very ironic that we are talking about the post-digital and I can't get a good internet connection. But in some ways, maybe I can use that as the beginning of what I want to talk about, which is already the fact that we're talking about post-digital and Phygital, is to say that there is not a difference between the physical and the digital worlds. I think this is true, but maybe not for the reason that you might expect. You know, the digital is, of course, a human invention. I'm really hoping you can hear me okay. Cool. The digital is a human invention, but of course it has huge impacts or big impacts on reality. And the invention of digital technologies has transformed our planet and is also destroying its ability to sustain human life. So digital technologies are dangerous for our species in many ways. That's my kind of starting point. On the other hand, I'm hopeful about new directions in digital design, but I'm also removed from them, actually. I was born in 1987, and when I was born, Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and Deng Xiaoping were the rulers of the major powers. And you can imagine that that's quite a different time, before the internet, before really personal computers. The Russian poet Mayakovsky has a beautiful poem, which is what it means to be born between two centuries. And in my case, I live both with a memory of the 20th century, of the pre-digital, the pre-internet era, and of course with our 21st century. And Mayakovsky says that to be born across two centuries is to be an animal with a broken spine. The legs walk forward, but the head looks back. And that's often how I feel, being split between these two worlds. My understanding of the digital is really just a continuation of many other types of information and systems inventions of the last 2 centuries. If you think about the invention of bureaucracy, let's say in the 1700s and 1800s, The role of bureaucracy was to take very complex information about individuals and about society and try to simplify it until everyone could fit inside these categories. And there's a very dangerous process for me in terms of that abstraction, which happens when we force people into particular systems. So in that way, I see many of the digital spheres which exist today are just extensions of bureaucracy, of capitalism, of patriarchy. And one of the roles that the designer has played in this is slowly removing the body and slowly removing the non-commodified or non-transactional human relationships from everyday life. This is a big thing that I'm interested in. So in a way, the early internet was very separate from your personal life and from what we now call the real world or real life. It was described as cyberspace, and it was a space which was anonymous and which was largely free from any rules of engagement and all sorts of other. You there? Hello? Just
Hello, Jack.
checking.
Yeah, we lost you for a second.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah, so I was just saying that in the late 1990s, for example, when I first joined the internet in 1994, the internet was a place which was very free, very open, where there were no rules of copyright, where there were no rules of ownership that existed in the same way. And then after around 2006, with the rise of Web 2.0, we started to see a swap between real life and digital life. So previously, in the real world, you were subject to surveillance, to monitoring, to controls of your physical presence in space. And the digital was a space to be free, a space to be anonymous. Now it's the other way around. The digital is a space where you are surveilled, where your data is monitored and controlled. And the only place now where you can be free, I think, is if you can have a real life conversation without your phone. As long as you don't have a smartphone and you're free from digital technology, that's for me really the only place of freedom. But I'm also interested in how design plays a role in this, and I have some specific examples. I mean, one of the things which profoundly changed our relationship between the digital and the physical was the addition of the camera to the phone, and of course the rise of social media. Because when you get positive feedback for producing images and putting them on a social network, you begin to see the whole world through the lens of social media. I think all of us, when we are on holiday, when we are going to a special place, we immediately begin to see the world as if it were a series of Instagram posts or other types of social media posts. So our relationship with the physical has already become highly abstracted. Nobody gets an amazing cup of coffee and doesn't think maybe this would look good online. It's that level of transformation. The second aspect of this kind of removal of the body or abstraction of the individual, I think, is the rise of contactless technology. I'm very sad about contactless technology. When I was growing up, it was common to have a job working in a supermarket at the sale point, swiping with the beep of the products and doing the checkout. But with contactless technology, now, even as an adult, I have to work for the supermarket. I'm doing the work of putting the objects in the bag. But more than that, contactless technology is removing a type of conversation, a way of relating to other people, which was very important before, because contactless technology removes the excuse to talk to strangers. 20 years ago, I used to speak to lots of strangers in the post office, in the supermarket, in the bank, on the street, at the bus stop, in the metro or the subway system. But now I have no excuse because of the rise of contactless technology, which abstracts and turns all of my relationships into transactions. I mean, I could go on, but perhaps the final thing I would say is this change between the physical and the digital and the dematerialization of the body and our ongoing abstraction, what you might call the abstraction of ourselves, until the self is really just no different from our virtual constructs, has really accelerated since 2016. And certainly the pandemic has accelerated it even further. Now the digital takes total priority and the physical is less and less relevant to our construction of identity or self. The example or the metaphor I would give perhaps, of course, our digital persona are not real, and they're kind of a paper version of us. They're two-dimensional in the same way that our passport or our driver's license or our identity card, they contain some information about us, which is true, like our date of birth, our first name, our last name, but they don't tell you about your childhood memories. They don't tell you about your friends. Because they only present the information which is relevant for you to be categorized and controlled. In the same way, I think of social media today a little bit like in China, you have the red plays. And in the red plays, there are actors which are excited and enthusiastic and very energetic. And their emotions are not real because they are actors, and the emotions are used to tell a story. In a way, our digital lives are like the actors in a red play, and the real life that we have is the backstage. It's the time when we are taking off the makeup, when we are preparing or rehearsing our lines. And I think this relationship between the digital and the physical is not a healthy one. I do see, though, especially amongst a younger generation, a generation who are perhaps in their early 20s, a very different critical relationship with the digital space or digital technology, which is really about trying to exit your own bubble, trying to exit the smaller and smaller world that your digital persona pushes you into, and trying to find, a kind of a broader engagement with civil discourse. The very final thing I want to say is about the role that we play as designers and how we think about the relationship between the digital and the physical. For me, all design has content and it has context. The content I'm not going to tell you about because you will be working on that. You will be making virtual worlds. You will be making all sorts of objects, images, entities which exist, and that's up to you. The context, though, is something which we often forget as designers. We get so excited about the content that we stop thinking about the context. And when it comes to context, I always think of how journalists think about context. Every newspaper article always begins with the following categories: who, what, where, why, when, how. In those first couple of sentences, they are asking, who is involved? Why are they involved? What has happened? How did it happen? Where did it happen? When did it happen? And I think as designers, we often forget to ask more questions about these categories. Who is asking us to design? Why are they asking us to design? What did they want to get out of our design? How will our design exist in the world? And what type of influence will it have? And that analysis of power, of wealth, and of other types of interests, I think is really critical if we are going to use the Postdigital or the Phygital to push for greater levels of equality, which in my case is what I'm really interested in. So I'll conclude there. I hope that this speech without any presentation wasn't too boring, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jack. Yeah, indeed. It's really important. Like at the end, when you conclude, I think for us as designers, it's really important to have these sensibilities to contemporary and the presence and what is happening around us, and start to question the context. And I do look forward to a deeper conversation with you later after the presentation. And lastly, I would like to warmly welcome Lara Lesmes and Frederick Hellberger, who is also my mentor and tutor at the AA. Lara Lesmes is an architectural designer and educator based in London. Together with Frederick Hellberger, she directs the research and design practice Space Popular, which is a multidisciplinary design and research practice. They teach the Research MArch unit, the civic program at the Architectural Association in London. Since 2020, they have also taught a research studio at the University of Toronto. They create spaces, objects,